Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and there's a lot of discussion. We don't know the truth, frankly, at least I don't, about all the pesticides in our water. Is that causing the cancer rates? Is it not? There's legislation now, SSB 1051, that looks to possibly shield pesticide manufacturers from litigation. And now, again, not a scientist. I'm just going by what we have by what we have available to us. And part of this legislation, SSB 1051, Senator Tony Bisignano is against, and we're going to find out why that is today. Senator Bisignano, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for inviting me. This is a subject that people need to know about because it's coming up very quickly.
Yeah, so let's start really broadly for those that don't know. There are, as there always are, a lot of things that your constituents and voters need to be aware of, and it changes rapidly. So can we broadly go to what is SSB 1051? Then we'll get into the nuance, why you disagree with it, why you're concerned about it, that kind of stuff. So can we zoom out broadly and first discuss just what the heck this thing is?
Yes. SSB 1051 is a pesticide, we say tort liability. What it does is it will shield the chemical manufacturers from lawsuits if they comply on their product in the EPA-approved label. Now, that in and of itself is where the hook is. Iowa, I think the thing that people need to keep focused through this whole discussion, Iowa is second in the United States in cancer.
Right, that's a good point.
It's the only state that's growing in cancer.
It's still growing.
It's still growing.
Goodness.
We will probably be number one in cancer in this country. Now, that's shocking. That's startling. Yeah. It's frightening. But we also know the risk that an agricultural state has.
Right.
And that's what this bill does is it's pushed by the manufacturers. They've already had problems in this area. This is just to mitigate future liabilities, and that's what I'm opposed to.
Yeah, and so the manufacturers being, I know one's Bayer, I believe. Are there others? Because I don't actually know.
Well, I don't have other names that throw out. There's all kinds of chemicals. There's probably 1,000 chemicals that do what this glyphosate does, even though glyphosate is owned and patented by.
So we'll talk about that too, because that's a whole ball of wax as well. So I guess we should start with who is against it. Obviously, you're against it. And you had a comment. I believe it was the Register stating that, right? I think it was the Register. I saw your comment. But you're obviously against the bill. Can you tell us, and you alluded to it a little bit, but can you tell us why you're against SSB 1051? I think some are calling it the Cancer Gag Act. I think that's not the official name of it, obviously.
Well, and that's kind of what it is, because what you have to go back and realize is the EPA approves your label.
Mm-hmm.
The EPA does not do any research. The EPA takes the research from the chemical industry, and then they evaluate it from there. What the bill does is says that if you abide by the EPA labeling, then you're immune from future lawsuits. Well, it doesn't take much to go back and look at that theory, whether you're talking about asbestos, whether you're talking about DDT, whether you're talking about opioids, whether you're talking about smoking. On the front end of all that, they were miracles. They were great. Doctors were recommending smoking. Asbestos started back in the 40s in its application in the fiber form. And lawsuits didn't come until the 70s. So what we're saying is you may be right. Your particular product may never cause cancer. But in a state that's second in cancer and growing, and the application, we're the largest state for using this product, that don't you think that if 20 years, 30 years down the road, it's a proven fact that this caused Parkinson's disease and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and all the other things that it's attributed as possibilities, Iowans deserve the right to rectify that through the court system, not through the legislature. Legislature should never tell people they don't have recourse when they're harmed, and that would squelch that because they comply with today's label.
Right.
Well, we're not worried about today. We're worried about the future, 2045, sure. 2050. There's enough circumstantial and anecdotal evidence to show that this is causing that, it contributes. A lot of things contribute to cancer. And I don't want to say, it's the chemical, that's why we're all getting cancer. No, Iowa, first of all, is, I think, maybe number one in the state in binge drinking.
I think that's true.
That's laughable.
I think that's probably true.
But alcohol is a big contributor to cancer.
It is, absolutely.
And so, to lay it all on the doorstep of one, no. But if you're contributing, if you're a piece of that and you've made a profit, then I think at that point you owe it to human beings to say, we're sorry and we're willing to compensate you. Obviously, Bayer has had settlements, billions of dollars. And what this bill will do, it would make Iowa the only state in this product that wouldn't be able to seek recourse through the courts.
Now, I don't understand this aspect of it, but as I was reading up on the topic, I think it was a Bayer representative. And like I've said, everybody, I don't know who's responsible for what. I can't tell you if pesticides cause cancer. I don't know. The goal of this show is to get to the truth. But Bayer has said, and again, this is not a gotcha. I don't understand this. Bayer has said that even if SSB 1051 passes, they'd still be open to lawsuits for wrongdoing. But so I'm hearing there's a little bit of gray area or nuance here. How can they say that, but then also push for the bill at the same time? I don't can you help explain that?
Well, and that's a great question, because if it truly is innocuous, then what's all this push for? Why is it in the state of Iowa, the largest user of glyphosate? Mm-hmm. Why are we preempting the future? And any legislator that represents 65,000 people in the Senate that would dispel their constituents to seek recourse ought to be ashamed, because we represent people. The chemical industry, Monsanto's, they're all well represented in the Iowa Capitol. And you, as just an Iowan out there working hard, doing the right things, you count on your representatives to represent you like a lawyer would do at the Capitol out in the lobby. And when you side in with an organization against your constituents, I think you need to be reevaluated, because this is something that we're not going to see today or tomorrow. Both of us might not even be here when this finally becomes like asbestos and DDT and all those other things that we found the long term are very, very bad for your health.
Yeah, so your argument isn't that glyphosate causes cancer. We know this. We should go after those guys. That's not what you're saying. You're saying, I don't know. And if information comes out later that shows they're liable, we should allow people to go after them in court. Is this fair?
Yes, that's a fair statement. It's preempting their rights. And the court system should be the only one to litigate your wrong. And it shouldn't be legislators who receive support from Bayer. Believe me, the chemical manufacturers contribute a great deal of money at all levels of government. And frankly, it's really disgusting. That it's so simple. Just leave it where it is and let nature take its course. And if your product doesn't harm people, you have nothing to worry about.
Right. So I honestly, and maybe I'm wrong on this, I can't find, on most issues, you're probably aware of this these days, most issues seem to fall on political battle lines. This one's getting a little bit confusing for me to follow, because Republicans were in support of it last legislative session, And now here we are. It didn't get a vote. I think Republicans for that vote. I don't have the bill right in front of me, but it was mostly on party lines. It was mostly Republicans that voted for it, Democrats that did not. I think 4 Republicans, if memory serves, broke from the party and voted with the Democrats. But again, it didn't get to the final vote. It didn't get through. So now it's being put up again. The battle lines are kind of weird, in my opinion, because like. The Iowa Soybean Association, Iowa Corn Growers Association, Iowa Farm Bureau are supposedly for the bill, but then there are some, I had it written down here. I don't have it anymore, sadly. Shoot, where did it go? Anyway, there was I think the Farmers Union is actually against the bill. Yeah. So are you hearing, what are you hearing from constituents? And I know it's hard, but what are you hearing? Are farmers generally concerned about the bill? Are they supporting the bill? Because some say like, oh, it's going to help the farmers. And other people say, no, that's actually killing farmers because some of them think their cancer's coming from it. Obviously, we don't know. What are you hearing?
Well, I guess, first of all, farmers know better than anybody. And being from urban Iowa, Des Moines, I visited, and was the ranking member of agriculture until shortly ago. So I would meet with many farmers, many ag groups, and so forth, dealing with ag legislation. And farmers, it was odd that when you talked in a group of farmers would talk to you on the side and say, you know, when I was a kid, my job was to apply pesticides. Mm-hmm. And I know that I got Parkinson's disease, and I know it's from that, but I can't say it because of my friends in farming. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an intimidation. Yeah. And it's
unprovable, too. Like, we don't actually have any proof for it.
Exactly. I think it's part of the cocktail in a lot of ways with your body. And anytime you increase your likelihood, now, I don't do pesticides, so my likelihood that is lower.
Right.
Theirs who maybe stirred the pesticide with their hands, I don't know, spilled it on themselves, they know. And so I think what we have to do, again, is step back, allow Iowans to seek recourse if they're harmed. The chemical companies will protect themselves at the appropriate time. But I don't think we preempt Iowans. And you hear all this scare tactics that, oh, we're not even going to have access to this chemical. We're the largest user.
Right. 90%, I believe, of Iowa farmland is treated with glyphosate, I think. And now for some people wondering, yes, glyphosate is an herbicide. However, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Bisignano, but I think I'm pretty sure glyphosate from a regulatory and legal standpoint falls within the pesticides category. So this SSB 1051, even though it's for pesticides, would actually protect companies from glyphosate litigation as well. Is this correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
There's thousands of chemicals that could fall under this immunity.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't understand why we're so anxious. The Republican Party is so anxious to give that protection to corporations, even Chem China, the paraquat. It's illegal. There's things that are illegal in foreign countries that are shipped here and we use.
It's true.
Now, that's wrong. Yeah. If they're cognizant of the fact that, hey, we don't want this in our country, but if the Americans are going to buy it, let's ship it to them. That's the lobby in this country, allowing this to come in. And I'm not saying anything about specifically causing any kind of cancer. I'm saying it is a potential. Studies have shown that it has been linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other illnesses. We don't know. Now,
because it does sound like, if I'm reading between the lines, Republicans are still very much pushing for this and Democrats are opposed to that, is this where the political battle lines, at least for this bill, are drawn? Mostly,
I would say in a large percent, there will be Republicans again that will oppose this. Yes. But it'll pass.
You think it will pass?
Yes, if it comes up, it will pass. Republicans bring nothing up that's not going to pass. and they bring nothing up that they don't have all the votes to do. So they're not going to work in a bipartisan fashion with Democrats over it. It will be a Republican-driven bill.
Now, I want to go back to something you said, which is really important, which I think a lot of people, a lot of listeners aren't aware of, which is similar, and again, there's some nuance here I'm going to get wrong, but similar to the FDA, the EPA works in a similar fashion, which is the manufacturers themselves are responsible for the majority of the research submitted to get approval. They're actually the ones funding, controlling, and providing most of that research. Is this correct?
Yes.
So would the Republicans consider an amendment that says, hey, Democrats are okay with this as long as you put an amendment in there that says, however, if it turns out the research was flawed, inaccurate, or information was adjusted, then this whole thing is null and void. Would they be open to having something like that put in there?
Let me clarify. Are you saying if we prove or it's proven that there's fraud?
Yeah, no, not just fraud, but bad research or fraud or buried numbers or any inaccurate research. Someone made a mistake in the research. Would they be willing to put that in the bill, saying, well, sure, we've got, like the companies have nothing to hide. If they were fraudulent in the research, sure, this should invalidate everything. Have those discussions happened?
Well, first of all, the Republicans don't accept anything the Democrats propose. So if we propose an amendment like that, it would be defeated.
You think they just shoot it down immediately?
They would shoot it down, okay. and if they really did like it, they would then refile it under their name. I mean, it's that parochial. And so there really isn't the opportunity anymore to have this kind of bipartisan discussion and come up with a bill that both sides could say, we've changed it. We think it's workable. This protects Iowans. We don't get that opportunity. This is Republican-driven by whatever reason. They think it's important to sell out Iowans. We don't believe that, and we're going to try to defeat the bill, but I think it's going to be very difficult.
So we're living in odd political times because last week, and I'm curious if this completely changes how this bill is voted on, because last week, one of the most successful attorneys who went up against Monsanto in a glyphosate lawsuit and won, I think he won $290 million. I think, was this California? I think you know where I'm going with this. Is Robert Kennedy Jr., who is now the HHS Director in the Trump administration. So does this completely change then how Democrats and Republicans view this issue? Because he's very much concerned about glyphosate. He's won lawsuits. He's now ahead of the FDA, CDC, and all these regulatory bodies. Does this change how people vote?
I don't believe so.
You don't think so?
I think at the state level, when the bill gets drafted and it's put into the mechanism of subcommittees, and that it's already got its votes. Rarely do bills get defeated that Republicans bring forward. And I don't think it has anything to do with facts. And that's the disheartening part of politics anymore, is it isn't about convincing people in a speech or in rhetoric of a fact that, hey, we don't need to go this far or we need to modify this. Those days are gone. And we've been shut out. We've been shut out for years now. And anything we file is killed. Any amendment that's brought forward is defeated. So this is disheartening because I am an Iowan and so are you. And it isn't just in the ground. It isn't just out in rural Iowa. You're drinking this. Look at the urban impact of chemicals out in rural Iowa. It's in our food. It's in our air. It's in our water. And so you can say, well, that's rural Iowa. No. This is affecting Iowans at every level. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., when one of the things he said, and I hope he's true to it, is trying to find out what's making our kids sick.
Right.
I mean, that is the premise of all of this, is the future, taking care of the future. There's kids that aren't born yet that could potentially get cancer from pesticides or herbicides, but we got to have the mechanism to protect them. Yeah. And that's what this bill's going to take away.
Yeah. And I want to reveal my own biases here because I have recently realized only in the last few years when I have grain that was treated with pesticides, my sinuses clog up, and my at first I thought it was kind of there was actually a military buddy of mine, a major in the Iowa National Guard, that told me to look into this. And just me anecdotally, this is not research, just anecdotally, I've noticed that if I stay away from glyphosate pesticide treated crops in my food, I feel better. And if I eat them, my sinuses clog up and I get like breathing, not dangerous breathing, but breathing out of my nose is like more hard. Just me. It could be that I'm allergic to something in there that other people aren't. But this is why I'm particularly interested in this issue, because at least for me, can't speak for Iowans, but at least for me, I have noticed a pattern when I start to eat foods from like France or something, or French flour. I feel great. But certain American companies, when they're providing grains, I don't feel so good. So I do have a bias, and on this show, I try to disclose all those biases. But this is why I'm particularly interested in this issue, because I feel like there's a lot of unknowns here, and it's something we should dig into. I got a call. This is actually funny because this is after this was set up. I got a call from someone claiming to be the Modern Ag Alliance. The Modern Ag Alliance is apparently, it's a call from a random number, so who knows? But apparently the Modern Ag Alliance is now doing like calls, like a bunch of robocalls, and it is real people to pick up. They sound like they're not here from the United States, about advocating for glyphosate. So this, I'm sure you're aware of the Modern Ag Alliance. They're actually pushing glyphosate and why we should use it and why it's safe. My early research showed that that Bayer is one of the organizations backing that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But is this organization attempting to push forward this bill? Is this the objective of the Modern Ag Alliance?
I would assume exactly it is. And then you would have to go back and figure out who's funding it.
Right.
Those are a lot of interesting things when you look back at all the information that we get sent to us from all these research groups and so forth. There's a look behind the curtain and see who the wizard is. And a lot of times it's the industry that we're looking at, but they flower it with all these different studies. There's just, I guess, is coincidental, in things. One of the things that I've noticed is Iowa has the largest rate of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in the nation. And we have the highest exposure to RoundUp and glyphosate. Now, doesn't mean anything, doesn't affect, it doesn't prove. It's just another brick in the wall.
Yeah.
And that's all we want to establish as Democrats, is that the wall is there. This particular chemical, glyphosate, does great things. And that's where we get our blowback from the farmer.
Right.
This has doubled our crop. This is, we'll go out of business, all these things, but I don't believe any of that, because I believe that industry is always capable of compensation. They'll figure out how to moderate something to keep the sales going. Monsanto didn't get to where they are, or Bayer aspirin didn't get to where they are. And I call them Bayer aspirin because I remember as a kid, the commercials that says Bayer works wonders. Well, Bayer now is a chemical owner.
Right.
And it kind of skews to me, Bayer, the name, the label. But I just want to have opportunity for people in the future. That's all. And the Republicans are trying to cut it off in the short term because of the support from corporations like Bayer.
Now, because we're talking about Bayer, they obviously bought Monsanto. They make drugs, pharmaceuticals. They bought Monsanto, and when they bought Monsanto, they bought RoundUp, which is the glyphosate, which has glyphosate in it. Bayer happens to make anti-cancer drugs as well. There are 3 that I know of. There may be more. And so is this part of the concern and the conflict? And again, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but is this part of the concern that the organization that maybe has a ingredient that causes cancer is also the same organization that's treating it? Is this being discussed? Is this a concern?
Well, it's an irony, to say the least. But these corporations that have been around, and Bayer goes back to 1930s. It may even farther than that. Bayer has some very questionable reputation as far as their moral corporate values back to World War II. But back we move forward, Bayer, they're smart enough. They know how to move. They know how to weave. They see an opportunity here that if non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is going high in Iowa, whether that's connected directly to that chemical or not, they're already anticipating that we better get on the cutting edge. And so that's the irony, and it's not necessarily wrong, because if they can cure cancer, God bless them.
Yeah.
But the fact is they're on both sides. And I just think that, again, they keep saying, the people that are proponents keep saying, this is a simple bill. This is all about labeling. I'm going to say it's a simple bill, too. But it's not about labeling. It's about protecting Iowans in the future.
And when you say labeling, what the proponents of this bill are saying, which sounds like Republicans, Bayer, some other organizations, obviously, that we love here in Iowa, they may or may not be wrong on this, but that's the way it goes. That's how politics works. They're basically arguing for, if the labeling is accurate and according to the EPA says it's safe, then it's safe, and therefore we can't be sued in civil, like civil. We're protected from civil liability.
Yes.
So what would be an example, just citing their own data, of where they wouldn't be? Because they say they can still be sued. So according to them, how would that even work? Would it have to be a criminal case then?
Well, I think they'll lean into, is it fraud? Is it mislabeling? Is it all those? Is it a product defect? Well, none of those are probably going to happen. They're corporations that they know. Their legal looks at their advertising. They look at their labels, all those things. So when they give you that double talk that you have the right to sue, it's only would be under those conditions.
Yeah. So what, to your point, 90%, I think I'm the one who brought the data up. So for everybody, if the data is wrong, it's my fault, not Senator Bisignano. But most Iowa fields are treated with this stuff now. What's the solution when people say, hey, Senator Bisignano, I don't want to treat my crops with this stuff if it's hurting my family, but come on, what am I supposed to do? Are there good alternatives for people presently that we're just not using? Or are there no good alternatives? And this is one of those things where you're like, guys, it's better for you. It's better for the environment. We're going to have to take a temporary hit, but that's okay. What does that discussion look like when you speak to a farmer?
Well, we don't have that discussion. Because the ag economy demands that they maximize. And that's why we have polluted water. Because I served back in the late 80s when we did the resource enhancement that required filter strips. Or at least I think incentivized filter strips along creeks. Well, as the price of corn went from $3 or $4 a bushel to $7 a bushel, every piece of ground can produce. And so when we were 15 feet on each side of a creek, now we're 5 feet. Because if you take that 10 feet, that's a significant amount of ground if you have a large farm.
Yeah.
And so I just think it all fits together. Would we reduce our yield? I don't know. That again would be a political argument. Some would say yes, some would say no. Are there more organic ways to do it? Some will say yes, some will say no. Those are for the scientists.
Do you see any Democrats that are lining up or preparing or indicating they will defend glyphosate? No. There's
no Democrat that would support this bill.
Anyone that supports the bill or is against the bill is welcome in here. Anybody that can attest to this show or who's been on the show knows that it's never combative in here. We want to get to the truth. We want to get everyone an equal voice. And so obviously I appreciate you coming in here. Senator Tony Bisignano, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa podcast. I appreciate it.
I enjoy this. This is an opportunity to, again, and you said it, civil.
Absolutely.
Have a civil discussion. There's not much civility left in politics.
There's not.
And, and things are driven by the outside, by the lobby, by the corporations, by Washington politics there, the agenda. And so to actually just sit down and let's just talk about Iowans. Let's talk about, our future and what our problems are here. This is a good thing. I appreciate being invited.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
My fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.